Greetings, everyone. This is Mike Riley, the voice of Ironman. And this is the Old School Tri Show with my Kiwi mates Cameron Harper and Brian Ashby. The show that talks about all things triathlon, old and new. We're powered by Ansco Foods, bringing you nutrition and good health from New Zealand's beef and lamb. Thanks for listening, everyone. Enjoy the show.
Hello and welcome. This is the Old School Tri Show, powered by the good people at Ansco Foods, as we look back over the 40-year history of Ironman New Zealand leading up to the anniversary in 2024 and beyond. And today, Brian, another great guest.
Indeed, in today's conversation, we're actually stepping into the new millennium. We're going to talk to a recent champion, our first winner from out of the UK, Laura Siddall.
Ansco Foods is proud to be the new naming partner of Ironman New Zealand, ensuring every stroke, pedal and stride is powered by the best nature has to offer. Ansco Foods is on a mission to bring nutrition and good health from New Zealand's finest beef and lamb. Ansco Foods, putting the iron in Ironman with New Zealand's finest beef and lamb. Visit anscofoods.com/Ironman to find out more.
Well, as we count down to the 40th anniversary of Ironman New Zealand in March 2024, we're aiming to speak to each and every champion. Since 1985, we've already spoken to a couple of the pioneers of our fine sport that have stacked up a few titles between them. But today we're going contemporary. We're talking to a recent champion, and it's a big hi to 2018 champion, Laura Siddall. Great to have you on board.
Thanks, guys. I should say kia ora, shouldn't I? And thanks for having me on. Gosh, I mean, you said recent. I know the race has been going for a long time, but 2018 seems a long, long time ago now.
Yeah, well, where do we find you at the moment? Where are you?
Yeah, I'm in Boulder, Colorado. So I've kind of been out here since the beginning of the year. As you guys know, I used to spend a lot of time in New Zealand down in Christchurch, and then used to split my time summer to summer between Christchurch and Girona in Spain. And then that was pre-pandemic, as the world we knew before the pandemic. And then in beginning of March, I actually headed out to the US for what I thought was a 5-week training camp with my new coach, Julie Dibbins. And during that time, the world shut down. And yeah, I've unfortunately not been back to New Zealand since. So yeah, it's been a while, but excited to get back there as well.
Well, we'll come back to that in a wee while. But first things first, your welfare. A nasty accident in Ironman Brazil, collarbone and a brain bleed, a concussion. Just tell us a wee bit about that, the timetable of that, and what happened, and sort of where you're at now.
Yeah. So yeah, I was racing Ironman Brazil in May, and I don't actually remember anything about what happened during the event. I just remember, the last thing I remember, I was coming to the end of lap 1 on the bike. I remember looking at my Garmin, seeing 85 kilometers. I remember looking at, it was a straight bit of road. It was raining. And I remember looking up and seeing a car on the side of the road, but in sort of the bike lane, because we were on the main road, and then there's a line of cones, and, didn't think anything of it. Just thought, oh, that's obviously how the locals are moving around the race. That was the last thing I remember. The next thing I remember, I was sitting on the other side of the road. The ambulance was already there. Helmet was already off. Yeah. And I mean, I remember when I came to, as what I remember it, I knew exactly where I was. I knew I was in a race, and I was in Brazil. I think piecing together things, people had found me unconscious on the road. And then obviously I'd come around and I was talking to them, but I don't think making much sense at first. And then from the moment I remember, everything was fine. Well, remembering everything was fine. But they took me off to hospital, obviously, and I had a CT scan, and it showed that I had a brain bleed. So I had to stay in overnight in the hospital, and they scanned the next day, and fortunately it hadn't got any worse and it hadn't developed, so they were okay to discharge me. And then I was able to fly back to Boulder the next day. I mean, super lucky in terms of, no broken bones as such, some random road rash and things like that, but obviously just a brain injury, and everything that goes with that it's kind of just an unknown. You go from, I wasn't able to drive. I wasn't able to do any training, or not, I wouldn't say training, any form of exercise. It was literally from 30 hours a week going into a race, probably in one of the fittest shape or the best shapes I've been in, which again, you don't really register till after the fact. Like when you're in that leading into the race, you've got all the nerves and stress of the race and convincing yourself you're unfit. But yeah, so 30 hours a week sort of leading into that race, and then to literally zero. I was able to walk for sort of 20 minutes a day, a few times a day, but the rest of the time it was trying to be resting and sleeping and that sort of thing. And I don't think there was, I've always played sport growing up as a kid. You're always active. And I don't think there's ever been a time where I've literally been not able to do anything. Even in, as I say, even in an off season, you try and stay relatively active and doing different things. So yeah.
For you, Laura, I mean, we know every recovery from any accident is different for everybody, especially when it comes to concussion. What was that like for you? I mean, it's a real step literally into the unknown, isn't it?
Yeah. And look, I was really lucky at the start, I think. I didn't have severe headaches. I didn't have light sensitivity, noise sensitivity, not overwhelmingly. With my coach, Julie, and some other people I worked with here, we were really good. We took a really cautious approach and stepped right back on things. It was 5-6 weeks of doing absolutely nothing bar the walking. And then we started to build up training gradually again. Like the first time I went swimming again was just a surreal out of body experience. It was nothing. It's so hard to explain. And, but, just doing 500 meters with all the toys really to help. And by the end of it, I was able to flip turn and without any issues, but because that was a worry. But I think then the things that are hard with it being an invisible injury, and it is so different to everybody, the fatigue level was something else. Like I would when I was building back up, I would do a run or something that, would have done with my eyes shut sort of pre-accident, and it would just wipe me for the rest of the day. And I'd have to be lying down and sleeping. And then I definitely noticed as we started building things up, again, you're not meant to look at screens, so I'd kind of removed a lot of that as much as you can. But, we use screens so much in day to day. And I just noticed that as we built things up, and if I was spending too long looking at screens or the computer or anything like that, or even just if I'd done too much during the day, I would get that headachy feeling. My eyes would be tired. I'd feel headaches in the evening. And that, to be honest, kind of carried on all the way through to Kona. So touch wood, I feel that Kona was a massive like turning of a corner or closing of a chapter, whatever you want to call it. And it might just have been partly mentally getting back on a start line and getting to the finish line, because there were times over this year where didn't know if that would happen again. And also what shape I'd ever be able to get back into. And then I also just think physically going into Kona, not knowing if, I was going to get headaches in the race. I was going to feel, again, Kona's hard because it's hot and humid. So you always get kind of some of those sensations, but being able to differentiate them between what was a real health concern or not. And touch wood, the body came through pretty well. And I feel sort of mentally and physically, that's been a massive shift pre and post then as to how I'm feeling and managing things.
So with where you are right now today in Boulder, how you you're fully confident in where you're at and your recovery is complete?
I mean, I'd say it's hard to say again with brain injuries. Like you just don't know if something's gonna. Like I've heard stories. So many people reached out, and it was amazing the number of messages I got with people saying, they thought they were fine, and then 2 years later they started getting symptoms again. So at the moment, touch wood, I'm feeling pretty good. I do say that I've probably now got I was never very good, or I'm still never good at sleeping and resting and recovery, but I now have kind of an inbuilt red flag that goes off in my head with a headache or with tired eyes when it's like, oh no, you need to back off, you need to get some more rest and more sleep. So I now have kind of an inbuilt alarm, I guess, on that. But the last scans I had before Kona, like the brain bleed was clear, which was the main thing, and everyone's pretty happy with how things are progressing. I still think there's minor issues, just like sometimes vision and balance and stuff like that. But I think on the whole, touch wood, we're heading. The other thing, I can just blame that on being blonde and getting older as well, right? And, I'm also, the other thing, it was funny, I'll tell the story. I'm now 43-year-old female. And so you're having these concussion assessments and they're saying, are you sleeping more than normal? And I'm like, yes, because you've told me I'm not allowed to do anything. So there's nothing else to do but lie on the sofa, listen to audiobooks kind of thing. And it's like, are you more emotional than your usual? And I'm like, well, yes, I've just gone through trauma. I've just gone through this accident, and then it's like, are you more irrational? And I'm like, stop asking me fucking questions. It's like, I'm also a 42, 43-year-old female, probably got premenopausal. Like my emotions and hormones are all over the place. So yeah, it's hard to tell on that one.
And this is the thing when you go to the doctor these days, and you get the results. Are like, for a gentleman of your age, you're actually going,
exactly.
Maybe the upside in all of this, Laura, is it's forcing your hand. You talked about recovery before. You're better at self-care now than you might have been previously.
Yeah, I think not particularly the last 2 weeks have been a bit bad, but and slipped back into old habits. But yeah, definitely to start with, like having to put naps into the day, which I never used to do, and I still listen to audiobooks, trying to limit that screen time. I've taken up like other I've taken up crocheting. Don't laugh, boys. But again, it was one of those where not meant to be looking at screens, and when you can't do anything and you can't even watch sort of Netflix or films and stuff. So a friend and I were like joking about what new hobbies we need to take up, and like all of our hobbies, we want to be active, we want to be outside doing stuff, and we couldn't. So I started doing crocheting, and it's advertised as being like really stress relieving and relaxing. Well, I can tell you it isn't. It's so stressful, even following these patterns and like looking at this.
So could you please, for Cameron and I, could you please crochet us M. Dot sweatshirts?
I should do, yeah. Or a kiwi. I should do or a silver fern or something. Yeah.
Well, let's turn our attention to Ironman New Zealand, and when you sort of first came out here, we'll just go slightly ahead of that, because as a triathlete, as a professional triathlete, we'll start there. You were actually sort of quite late turning professional, so just tell us about your early days in triathlon.
Yeah. So, as I said, always played sport growing up, but didn't actually start triathlon until I moved to Australia with my corporate job at the time, and started as a complete beginner. I was looking for something to do. I did a charity bike ride with friends from work, just on a very hybrid, flat road mountain bike hybrid and flat pedals. I don't even know if I owned any Lycra at that point. And friends just suggested, you should try triathlon. And obviously, similar to New Zealand, Australians love their triathlon. So found a beginners group and started doing it on a beginners course. And yeah, that was at the age of 29. Loved it, got hooked, as most of us do. The lifestyle, the community, the friends, all of those good things about the sport, and progressed through the age group ranks. And then and was able to race a couple of 4 world championship titles as an age grouper. Mainly sprint Olympic distance, but I did then venture to the 70.3. And it was kind of after 4 or 5 years as an age grouper, sort of friends suggested, you should think about turning professional. But I really didn't know what that meant. And, growing up in the UK, sport was very much the hobby. It's what went on your CV to show that you had rounded skills to that employer. It definitely wasn't considered a profession at that point. I do caveat that it has changed now, which I think is amazing, and a lot more opportunities. So, yeah, I was now 34 years old, in Australia still, but decided that, I'd never really fully given my attention to sport. As I said, it'd always been that hobby, and wasn't getting any younger. So it was kind of if I want to give this a crack, it's sort of now or never, and didn't want to look back 10, 20 years time and think, what if I hadn't given it a shot. So I reached out to a coach in the US, and he agreed to coach me if I moved to the US and moved to San Francisco. So yeah, kind of resigned from the corporate world, and I think 4 weeks later was out in America as a full-time professional and trying to figure out what the hell that meant. And that's, it's pretty much, it'll be 10 years come March next year as well that I'll have been a full-time pro. And I'm very, very grateful that I've had that opportunity to choose to do something I love as a career, and the highs and lows that go with that, for sure. But no regrets at the moment for making that decision.
Finish with that. No regrets there, because I'm going to stuff this up, Sid. But one of your sayings that always sticks with me is, don't die wondering, or something along those lines. And that's essentially what this was, right? I mean, that's a heck of a leap of faith in your early 30s to go, you know what, I'm going to chuck in a successful career to be an athlete. I mean, some people must have looked at you sideways.
Yeah, my dad and parents, I think, for one. I was my first corporate job was with Shell, so a big multinational. And even when I decided to stay in Australia and left Shell and stayed in the corporate world, but I remember my dad very clearly sort of saying, what are you going to do about a pension? They're such a good company and that sort of thing. And God knows what he thinks now with no pension and 10 years later as an athlete. And still get, I'm going home at Christmas, and I can guarantee I'm going to get family, friends and stuff going, when's your gap year going to finish? When's your career break going to end and you're going to go back to the corporate world, kind of thing. So it was, you're right, Cam, don't die wondering, was a phrase that someone sent me in a text message as I was heading out to the Ironman 70.3 World Championships as an age grouper. And that was kind of like my first sort of, stepping up the distance and thinking, oh, actually, maybe I can do this. And I've, carried that with me to try and live by in those decisions where it's like, F it kind of thing. And I've got to do this. Otherwise, I don't want to live with those. Don't want to look back, like I said, 5-10 years time and think, what if?
At what point did you do your first full distance? Were you professional at that point, or was it pre-professional?
So I actually did my first full. I did the classic thing that all beginner triathletes do, and they start the sport as a complete beginner and they sign up for an Ironman. Partly also because I only thought I was going to be in Australia for 2 years. And I was like, I don't want to go and train for an Ironman when I'm back in the UK, because who wants to go and like ride and swim and run in all the UK weather? So I actually in 2009, I signed up and did Ironman Western Australia in Busselton. Got it round, tick that box, and then went back to sprint and Olympic distance, and then stayed there as an amateur and moving through the amateur ranks. And that's where I got the amateur world titles. And it was only when I was making that transition to being a professional that I knew I couldn't be a professional at the short distance because of age, and you had to be in a government program with British Triathlon or whatever. And also my swim was never going to be good enough for ITU racing. And so it was inevitable that I would have to move up the distance. So then, started back into the 70.3 distance. And I think did again another full distance as a pro at the end of 2014.
And first visit to New Zealand's 2016. Yes,
I was just rapidly trying to work that one out and wondering what. That's right. Yeah.
So I presume you probably a bit of a double dip on those New Zealand trips, come do Wanaka and then Taupo.
Yeah, I think the first year I just did Wanaka and it was a full distance, and I think it was we mentioned her earlier off air, who won, and she was a purple patch athlete as well, from Gina Crawford. Did Wanaka, and then she went off to do Taupo and Ironman New Zealand. And I was like, that's crazy. 2 full distance in 2 weeks. What a mental thing to do. And then I think I found the next year that was me doing that as well. And I'd sort of got sucked in with just the beautiful place that the South Island and the North Island was. And so, yeah, ended up, I think maybe now I'm testing 2 years of doing the double when they were both full distances. And then Wanaka went to a half. And then, so yeah, carried on doing the half and then coming up to Taupo to do the full. There's 2 weeks later.
So 2016, your first at Ironman New Zealand. So I'm guessing you're probably 2015 when you did Wanaka the first time. So 2016, and gosh, Meredith Kessler was sort of in the middle of her unbelievable
reign supreme, queen of Taupo. Yeah.
So what was it? Yeah, just describe that sort of first one. I think you came home fourth in your first attempt there.
I'd heard so much about the race, and obviously I'd now started sort of spending more and more time in Christchurch, had absolutely fallen in love with New Zealand. And so coming up to Taupo that year, obviously I think Cam Brown, you correct me because you know the stats, did Cam Brown win that year as well? Was he on his huge run of successes? It was somewhere around there. Anyway, but Meredith and Cam, I think, and just seeing the response and the welcome that they got and the incredible history of the race, and just, I think, meeting everybody up there, meeting the community. I had a fantastic homestay who, still keep in touch with. I haven't actually asked them yet if I can come back and stay this next year. I need to get that sorted. They might have disowned me by now. It's just a truly special place. I think there's very few races I think I'm lucky. I've done some great races, but the volunteers in Taupo definitely stand out for me. And that atmosphere and just the way the whole town and community embraces it. It was just, an absolutely incredible buzz.
You're right. That was Cameron Brown's 2016. I remember, just as an aside, I remember it well. It was a big, heck of a battle all day with Callum Millwood and Joe Skipper. The three of them had a great men's race that day.
Yep, and I think I'm not sure if it was that year. I think it was Cam Brown's speech was one, I think, to go down in the record books as well.
Was that the Good Bastard speech?
Yeah, that was the Good Bastard speech. I'm pretty sure.
When he had to explain to overseas people that bastard was a term of endearment in New Zealand.
Right.
That was really good.
Is Taupo a course that suits you?
I like to think it does. I mean, I think obviously spending time in New Zealand, but also, people think, and it took a while. It used to be considered to be a slow course, and not many people would come because it was tough and it was slow. And like elevation wise, there's not a huge amount on the road, but the road surface obviously is what makes it. It just grinds you away. And I don't think people realize how tough it is on the legs until they get off and they start to run. And even the run, it doesn't look that taxing on paper, but just those small undulations up and down and stuff. It's a real, I think it's times are getting faster and faster. So maybe it's becoming more into that speed course, but I think I would class it in that tough course category. Yeah.
Just as an aside term, there's Ironman races all around the world. What was the attraction to come to New Zealand? Obviously, you had a great run in Australia too, 3-time champion over there. But what was the attraction to come to this end of the world?
So when I was working with my coach Matt Dixon at the time, and he worked with a guy called Paul Buick who lives down in Christchurch, and Paul just said, I wasn't particularly enjoying it living in San Francisco. And Paul said, hey, why don't you come down to Christchurch over summer and train down there? And so I did that. And I'm going to have to be careful what I say. I don't know whether it was just like coming back to the Southern Hemisphere. And I appreciate that Australia and New Zealand is very different. And that's a bit I want to caveat. But just coming back down to the Southern Hemisphere, it just felt like I was just putting on, like that favorite jumper, and just fell in love with the place. Like, as I said, the people and the welcome I got in Christchurch and taken into the tri community. And then obviously being down there enabled me to do the races, and it just became such a big part of me for spending time and then wanting to come back every year and train down there and then do the races and give back as much as I could to support the races in that way and support everyone who had welcomed me down to New Zealand.
Your second time in Taupo, it's well, you've sort of really gone from fourth, and you've stepped up onto the podium this time round, and Joss McCauley, Meredith Kessler either side, you sitting in second. Just tell us a bit about that day.
Yeah, I think that again, incredibly special to get on the podium. I think that was also the year that Meredith found out she was pregnant afterwards. I'm now trying to relive all the stories and things like that.
Sounds about right. Yeah.
But yeah, just Meredith in that era was such a legend of the sport. She was so dominant in every race she did. Leading into those years, whether it was Taupo, whether it was Arizona, whether it was St. George, all the races she did, she was just such at the height of her game. And, so whenever it was always such a privilege to race against Meredith, particularly in Taupo, because of the way the community embraced her. And obviously, I'm good friends with her, but obviously to get that second place on the podium and in Taupo was really special, and just I guess starts to put that. And I think it just starts you always want to have a good race in Taupo. You always want to have a good race wherever you do, but there are certain races that have kind of special meaning, and you just want to put that good performance out there. So that was a good start to things and a springboard for the following year, I think, probably.
I also remember that day, Sid, because yourself and Jocelyn were pretty much in each other's pocket right the way through. Obviously, legal drafting distances, let's clarify that. But you guys were in each other's pockets, but you were just on the end of Jocelyn just putting a run together. She went 2:59 mid somewhere that day. I think it was 2:59:30 odd. And she was just on fire that day. I mean, you had a very, very handy run, but Jocelyn just went away, didn't she?
Yeah, that's right. I was trying to remember just then. I can remember, I think we were pretty much together all ride, as you said, legal distance. And then on the run, had a few back and forth battles. I think I might have gone into the lead. Or maybe that was the next year, but then she overtook. But she had just a stellar run. And I think almost was a turning point for the race in showing that you can run sub 3 hours in Taupo. I know my mind is not quite, I don't know if any of the women had done it before, but I know during those sort of years, it was the first time that it was actually, that was she put down a really great run and deserved that victory that day for sure.
Mm-hmm. So, your year, as next you talk about the springboard, and you've taken some lessons, you've learned the course, you've gone toe to toe with some real rock stars, and you've got a really good feel for it. Was it the perfect storm for you? What went right for you to get up onto the top step of the podium in 18?
Do you know what? I can't remember. I think I must have had a relatively decent swim for me to put me in the mix. And I can't remember much about the bike, but I can just remember the run and having those battles of moving up and then moving past. I'm pretty sure Jocelyn was there again and moving past there and into the lead, but still kind of going, oh shit, I've still got a lap and a half to go kind of thing, and anything can happen and people could come back and stuff. Go on, Cam.
I do remember that day well, actually, because Teresa Adam was there, and Teresa had one heck of a swim. She obviously, women starting a couple of minutes behind the men. She caught up to most of the guys and overtook most of the guys.
Right.
I'm going to say she went sub 50 on the swim, but I also remember you had a very good bike rider. You were like a 450 something more, 455 in there somewhere. So you set yourself up exceptionally well that day.
Yeah, and that's right. Teresa, I think that was her first year sort of into the long distance. So we knew she was a good swimmer and a good bike. We didn't really know what she could do over that full distance. And obviously, Jocelyn is returning as champion, and my mind, I'll blame it on my brain and my concussion. I can't remember quite who else was on the start list. I know Meredith wasn't there that year because that was, the year that she had Mac. but yeah, I think the most vivid thing about that day, I obviously sort of, had a solid swim, set myself up on the bike and was able to run off it. And the cards fell my way in terms of everyone else's day and the performance I put in and moving into the lead. And I'm pretty sure it was kind of with a lap and a half to go, or at least another lap to go, and just sort of being like, oh my gosh, yeah, I've still got, you can't think about the finish line. And even, every time you come round to the turnaround, which is sort of parallel, or where it used to be parallel to the finish line. I think, Cam, you're up in the commentary box, and you get all the crowd, and then you still got to go out and go back out to the far end of the course and hope the legs carry through. And I don't think you really register you've done it until you actually sort of make that final left-hand turn and come down to the grass and onto the carpet and can actually see that finish line. And it's just, goosebumps now. It's probably, one of, any opportunity we get to win a race as a professional, I think, is incredibly special, and you cannot take it for granted. But, winning in Topor in 2018, having spent so much time in the country, having sort of, felt like I'd been taken under the wing and sort of part adopted, was just, an incredible. I still have such vivid memories of running down that finish chute, but you just want to bottle it all up and like keep it in a little jar that you can just open every now and again and hear that crowd and everything. Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say, Brian, I also remember with that, and sorry if you're going to ask the same question, Brian, sorry, no, but I also remember you talk about Cam Brown's victory speech in the Good Bastard era. I remember your victory speech, and forgive me if I'm wrong here, but you spoke exceptionally well that day, and you were very motivated by a letter you got from a young lady from the local school.
Yeah, that's right. I will go back to say, for starters, the other thing that was very special about Topor, and I think that ingrained in me what it meant to be a professional, was seeing, that awards banquet that happened and having the speeches from the winners. And that first year I did it with Meredith and Cam, and seeing their quality of speeches and kind of like was like, okay, this is what it is to when you win and when you're a professional. And so that opportunity, I think it was the first year that they did it. We got a letter in our pre-race packs from the local school children, and mine was from a girl called Ilya, and they wrote us all a little message. And it was just amazing reading those letters. I mean, I still have, I think she signed it off. I know she said things like, I think you're a winner. And she signed it off by saying, I think, swim like a stingray, run like a cheetah, bike like a monkey. And I think you are a winner. And so I'd got, that letter was amazing. It was in my race bag on race day. And I still don't know how this happened, but whatever you guys in the background or the team at Ironman did, as I'd crossed the finish line and, was having the interview with Mike, I'd got the finish tape, I was going through all those emotions of, oh my God, this just really happened. This is amazing. And someone came up to me and said, the little girl Ilya is over there at the finish. And I don't know how that happened. And so I went over to her and I could meet her and gave her, I think I picked her over the fence and she came into the finish line. And then the next day was able to, a couple of days later, went into the school, and which I always love doing anyway, because you get to see some of the traditional Maori music and songs, which is always amazing as well. And it was, I can't fully remember. I do have the speech recorded. I might have to replay it to bring back good memories before I come back there. But that letter, I still have the letter, and I still have those photos printed out of Ilya. And it was just like the icing on the cake of such an amazing day, that things had fallen into place, such with that letter coming and the words that she wrote in there. And I guess you can, to some extent, you can interpret the words as to how you want, but it just so happened that they fitted so perfectly with that performance and that race that year.
It's a lovely story, and I was just thinking before, I almost done you a wee bit of a disservice talking about you building towards your first title, but because it was your first Ironman New Zealand, okay, you won that, but parallel to what was going on here in New Zealand, of course, you put 3 in a row together in Australia at Ironman Australia, and 2017 was the first of those. So you knew what it took to get to that top step.
Yeah, I mean, I did. I'd had, I think there were several jokes going around for quite a few years that I've had more second places than there is on a clock face sort of thing, or more seconds than there are on a clock face, I should say. And it would always be, someone else. It would be a different person winning, and could she ever actually close it out and take that win? And yeah, I was fortunate that first Ironman win was in Australia in 2017, which was again incredibly special, with me starting the sport in Australia, and a lot of the people I started as a complete beginner, and a lot of the tri club in Sydney had all come up to Port Macquarie to race, and obviously then going back and defending it, going back and being able to wear the number 1 bib is such an honor anyway, and defending that, and then obviously the 3-peat was incredible. But and yeah, those races, like I said, any win you are incredibly grateful for, I do not take for granted, and they all have a special place in my heart and make up who I am or who my athletics career is. But then, and Taupo is one of those as well. It's just, yeah, I can't. It's funny as well. You try and describe to other people. Everyone has their own favorite races, and I'm gonna piss some people off here by going, oh yeah, Texas is the best race in the world, and all this, and this race has the best volunteers, and I'm like, you haven't been to Taupo, you haven't been to New Zealand, you haven't experienced what amazing volunteers, what the Ironman team in Oceania, the local team on the ground, like it's just another. But I don't know if anyone else gets it, because I think there's just that something about Kiwis, about the Maori culture. It's just, the people are so amazing. It just makes it so special.
Well, I think it's that I think you've nailed it, though, Sid, and it's the community of Taupo. I mean, you talk about the Mercury Energy volunteers and the selflessness. I'm getting goosebumps talking about the volleys, the selflessness these guys have to make sure it flows well. Like you talk about, Wayne Reed and the event director and the team and behind Wayne and how they make it work, and that is the selfless acts to make sure that no matter what happens in the back, it's about giving the athletes the best experience possible. I think that's part of the essence. And, when you've got the 240 tour, the waka comes out of the mouth of the Waikato River and up to the shore, and they lay down the whero, the challenge first thing in the morning. I mean, it's quite unreal and surreal as you're getting ready for a race.
It is. And the other thing that I think Taupo had such a big influence on me as a race, and in terms of what it is to put on an event and be a professional, is the volunteers party as well. Like, yes, quite a few races do it. I'm not dismissing that, but the one in Taupo is really special. That day after or 2 days after the race, I think it is. And, we go along and we serve beer and serve drinks to the volunteers. And again, again, a vivid memory for me, which completely took me back, was at that in 2018, going to that volunteers party. And I think, we get called up on stage with you guys, and there was I'm going to say spontaneous, I don't know, haka from some of the local volunteers when I was standing up on stage. And it's just an incredible, I was so honored and so humbled at the same time, and that they stood up and I don't know if perform is the right word, but delivered that haka. Then that's the beauty of the volunteers, and and all the people that come out and support. It's just a truly special place.
What was it like coming back, Sid, as defending champion?
Mixed, I would say. Obviously, I mean, a huge honor. As I said, it's always an incredible honor and experience to come back as the defending champion to a race. one that means so much. And then very mixed because I didn't have the performance I wanted on the day that year in 2019. Not saying well, obviously you kind of want to win and you definitely want to defend. I'm not saying that was possible, but just, yeah, I felt really disappointed that I'd let people down with my race that day. I think I was 4th again in 2019. So again, like just missed, and, you know, incredible performances by the women ahead, and they deserved that. And, but it was quite like a tough pill to swallow, just because you do, as I said, certain races have special place and special meaning, and you want to perform well for everybody and for everyone that supported getting you there, and for everything that community means. So yeah, incredibly proud to be able to come back as that defending champion, and then sort of that bittersweet not quite having the race that I'd have liked to have had.
But it's a difficult one, isn't it, Sid? Because, you know, when you look at the people in front of you, Jocelyn had another one of those days. I'm just looking at the result now, 2:58 marathon. I mean, goodness me, that's out the gate. But then you got Teresa Adam and Meredith Kessler. I remember that too, because Meredith and Teresa decided to try and make a bit of a break for it in the swim, and they just sort of took off from everybody. And like I said earlier, they overtake most of the men in the race as well. Yeah. So, I mean, you still had a very, very good day. It just so happened that podium was stacked that year. It really was. And the 4 of you were very competitive. And I think it was maybe more Brian and better than me. I think Rebecca Clark, I think it might have been Rebecca, was in behind you. And she was sort of coming up the ranks. So we had a very, very strong field that year.
Yeah, you're right. And you know what? It's been incredible to watch the race develop over the years. And especially, I think now we're coming into a new era of amazing Kiwi athletes and New Zealand athletes, with Rebecca Clark, who was kind of there or thereabouts in those early years, but she was relatively new and younger into the sport. Hannah Wells now, although Hannah Wells, that's not married name, is it? Hannah Berry, thank you. Yeah. And I think more people are seeing how good the race is and coming from overseas. But yeah, add that to the history of the races, you know, Meredith and however many times she's won. Jocelyn obviously is very fond of the place as well. Teresa Adam was in her having a great sort of year that year as well. I mean, that kind of was the start of her being pretty much near the best in the world and top of the rankings and things. So yeah, it's always a hard one. You have to look at you always want more out of yourself as an athlete, and you still get those roller coaster of emotions and the disappointment when you don't feel you've performed, but you have to be then, like you said, realistic in terms of those other performances were, I mean, they're just better on the day, and then use that to fuel and keep yourself driving in the sport and being like, okay, I can still do this better. I can do this better. I want to come back. I want to, keep going a bit longer.
Your dad, you mentioned earlier about your dad and your gap year, this never-ending gap year. Well, you kind of had a gap year or two enforced on your gap year career in the form of the pandemic. So, you know, with that sort of kicking in, were you left at times questioning, you know what, maybe it is time to step away and in a sporting sense, you're sort of caught in no man's land. You couldn't race. You just tell us how you came through that and out the other side of it.
Yeah, so I would say things started to shift. I guess that 2019 year, raced in New Zealand, raced in Taupo, and then went to Australia and was lucky to get my third win there, and then went to Europe as I normally do. Ended up crashing my bike and breaking my collarbone. So that kind of stalled stuff. And I think that started to, I think my relationship with my coach at the time was kind of coming to an end, but the collarbone sort of was a good kick up the ass to say, you need to change things. But the relevance of this, and I always ramble, was that I'd started to think that maybe it was near the end of my career. I was 39, we have to retire when we're 40. I didn't particularly want to change coach. Exactly. Yeah, I didn't particularly want to change coach because I thought, if I've only got a couple of years left, do you want to go through all that maneuvering of being with a new coach and stuff like that? But yeah, things that happened in 29 were a good kick up the ass for me to make that decision to change. And I moved across to Julie Dibbons, another Brit, but another one who lives in the US. And so I started with Julie at the end of 2019, and then we hit the pandemic, and then we hit COVID, and I ended up back in the UK with my sister. She did that classic, come and stay with me for a few weeks until this blows over. 6 months later, I'm still staying at her house, sort of thing, in the UK. And do you know what? To start with, again, I was going through I now had a stress fracture of my collarbone. And so actually at the start of the pandemic, it wasn't that difficult for me in terms, because I was rehabbing a shoulder. So actually I was loving training on the bike, running, being in the UK, couldn't swim, but that was fine. And every day I was actually just seeing improvements in my own fitness and health with the collarbone, which had since been plated. I think I got it plated on the last day of non-essential surgery before everything did sort of close. But I would also say I wouldn't have got through that without Julie, my coach. And, we didn't know each other that well. We'd only just started working together, but just her support and guidance through that time, through COVID. And then I think the hardest bit for me was that sort of, as you started to get fitter and that things started to open up a little bit, and I ended up I was able to get back to Spain, but then it was still pretty difficult to travel. There still weren't really races. That was the kind of like, well, and now I'm back to fitness. Like, what are we doing? But again, I think just a little bit the same like this year. When something's taken away from you, you realize how important it is, and that if you have the opportunity, you want to finish on your own terms, not someone else's. So that's very much that same. So that, again, with COVID, yes, being one of the older athletes, and probably kind of it, like it did to many of us, it robbed several years, or if you see it in that way, but there's, I think, a lot of silver linings out of it as well. It kind of went, okay, we just reassess, refocus. And also having moved to Julie, it showed me, I was like, I should have done this earlier. I should have moved to Julie 2 or 3 years earlier. She gave me a new lease of belief or confidence in what I could achieve as an athlete and what we could do together as a coach and athlete partnership. And that was really exciting. So that was kind of like, I want to carry on because I want to see where we can go together and what she can bring to the table to help me. And that's kind of where the last few years have been, is that I'm still super excited working with Julie, that I keep seeing yes, the sport is getting quicker and the women are getting faster, and my trajectory isn't going to be as rapid as theirs still, but I do still feel there are things I can improve, things I can race skills, race experience as well that you can still build on. And yeah, with Julie as a coach, I still feel I've got more to give. And again, like this year, having the accident in May and pretty much wiping out this year, it's kind of like, no, there's a couple of races that I still want to do before I hang up the swim, bike, run, so to speak. And I'm not prepared to go out on someone else's terms. I want to get back to the best I can in the circumstances given after the accident, and hopefully be able to make the decision myself when I feel that time is right.
Well, I guess we see people in the past like Natasha Badman, who was much closer to 50 than 40 and still racing as a pro. So you've got plenty of miles on the clock still.
Well, I'm not sure I'll go that far. I mean, obviously Cam Brown is a pretty good role model in that. Meredith Kessler as well. And then, my training partner here, Dee Dee Griesbauer, she's 53 and she's still crushing it and racing. So I'm not going to say I've got 10 years left in me. I'm definitely not. I don't think I'll be there that far. But yeah, just another couple of races or another couple of years, I think, to just
Well, you're
finish
going
off
to keep
some
coming
things.
back to New Zealand. We want you here, so we're just going to keep the pressure on you to make sure you keep racing.
I
To
can
that
say I
end,
am.
we're going to have you back here this summer.
You are,
back in New
yes.
Zealand.
So when I registered, well, one, I've wanted to come back anyway for once the world opened up again, and not just because I have a lot of shit left in Christchurch with Nadine, but obviously to come back.
Nadine voice be watching this going, yes, you
Yeah,
do.
yeah, she will. She says she probably sold it by now. She's probably. I'm not sure it's worth much, but so I've been wanting to get back, obviously, for a few years, but circumstances changing and now being more based in Boulder and just the way things have worked and still kind of the fallout, I think, from the pandemic has just made it a bit tricky. But yeah, 2024 with the anniversary of the race, it just seemed to fall into place. So that's the plan, to come back down to New Zealand and spend a bit of time and reconnect with everybody. I think it's just going to be a big party. That's what I'm hoping for, that it's just going to be, I think I'm going to be more excited to just see everybody and catch up again and have a good coffee down there and things like that.
You're contributing away from the race course these days too. You're on the board of the PTO.
Yeah, so keeping myself busy, on the board of the PTO for my sins, doing some commentary for Ironman, which I love. A few other things. Work with British Triathlon on a few things, and doing a course as well back in the UK, like a further education development program in sort of sports leadership and sports organisation. So that whole thing about rest and recovery that I was trying to take seriously, I just filled my time with everything else.
I think it's a good thing to be motivated, though, isn't it, Sid? And you are a very motivated person. So it's been an awesome chat today. I don't know, Brian, you got anything else to ask there? Are you still going?
Yeah, just one last thing. Your website, laurasiddall.com. People on the podcast here, go and check out Sid's website. You've even got some cool T-shirts and things for sale there. I presume you've still got some stock. I'm going to buy one of those. There's one in particular that I like. People check out Laura's site and get some insights into the things that make Laura tick and her wonderful career.
It's probably a good nudge. I should probably go back and update it. I'm not sure I've been on that for a while. I might need to go and update it. But thank you. Yeah.
At least the follow on the social media of some of your different bits and pieces. But look, thoroughly enjoyed the chat today, Sid, and we're both very, very excited to have you back in New Zealand over the summertime as well. Thanks very much.
No, thanks for having me on. Seriously, talking to you guys now and like just reminiscing, and it's just made me even more excited. I can't wait to get down there in February next year now. So yeah, bring it on.